Still on the Blue Economy Investment Summit. My name is Princess Soko, Chief Executive Officer, Maritime Innovation Sub and convener Blue Economy Investment Summit, which is coming up in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy and its agencies. The federal government approved a policy document for the ministry in May 2025 for a 10-year period. But what exactly is the current status of the Nigerian blue economy? Despite that recent policy attention, which is a complete deviation from the norm, I'm not sure we've ever had a policy direction as a nation in 111 years. The minister took a painstaking effort all through the year 2024 to develop that. It's not perfect, it's a work in progress. But despite the recent policy attention, which is a starting point, Nigeria's blue economy still remains underdeveloped. And here are the facts. When we look at ports and maritime transport, Nigeria presently handle over 70% of West Africa's trade, but still remain plagued by congestion, poor connectivity, outdated infrastructure, and high turnaround times. I know for a fact that we've been talking about 24-hour port operation and 48-hour cargo clearance for as long as a decade. When we onboarded the minister, I know the conversation that I led was on the ports. And that effort from that day up until now has led to a $1 billion port rehabilitation project by the federal government, which should be happening anytime from now, positively affecting the overhaul of Lagos, Tinkan and Wharf. I think some eastern ports, so that's a good starting point. Like I said, government is doing different things which are in different silos. But I think our ports, through that development and effort of the government, is going to experience an overhaul. But is that all? No. There are still a whole lot of infrastructural gaps, congestion. Even when you still visit Apapa today, it's still a mess. It's a shame of a nation. And some conversations are going to be focusing on what needs to be done and who needs to take responsibility for what. Also, when you look at shipbuilding and repairs, the shipbuilding and dry docking subsector still remains underutilized due to lack of financing, inadequate local capacity, regulatory bottlenecks. I think the master has worked in the last 1 or 2 years to remove some of the bottlenecks. Also, for the very first time in history, they have launched a portal where all the ship owners ship owners, so to speak, can apply for the CVFF fund. They've set up structure in such a manner that they have their own funding. Government puts also percentage on the table. You, the ship owner, put a percentage on the table. The PLIs, primary lending institution banks, can put also percentage on the table. But does that also solve our problem? I think there's a conversation on ship owners that deals with what can $25 million really do. Again, about 15 years ago, when governments began to talk about local content policy, I know someone was given a contract by Total to build a tugboat. Tugboat was $80 million in 2010, that particular tugboat. They wanted to show the capacity of local content. So 15 years down the line, you and I know that $80 million cannot even buy a ship. It was for a tugboat then. It can't build a ship. So are we to be talking about ship owners conversation right now, or are we to be talking about barge owners or boat owners conversation? That's another issue. But then, having said that, Dangote Refinery has come on within that same space, and there is a readily available cargo, whether you are carrying Dangote crude, whether you are carrying Dangote cement, whether you are carrying Dangote salt, whether you are carrying Dangote anything. So there is a gap in that space. I'm happy to hear that Dangote wants to diversify into steel. When we went to India for the very first investment outing of this particular president, I know there's a man called, he owns Jindal Steel. I remember his name is about an 80-year-old man. And I saw how they called him when he wanted to sleep and say, I'm aware you've been trying to invest in Nigeria. We're here to remove the bottlenecks. And they handed him over to 2 ministers and gave the 2 ministers a marching order to report about that particular company every month. And today, that particular organization has brought $5 billion into our steel sector. But then, the steel that we have today, can we still build ship internally? If we open up our shipbuilding capacity as a nation, can we compete with Korea, South Korea, and all that? Those are the conversations. If we want to what I'm sure Dangote has imported billions of dollars of steel for him to say, I can invest in this locally. So we've invited the Minister for Steel, for instance. I invited Ajakuta Steel Mill. We've invited a particular company, and surprisingly, they have manufacturing plants in 35 different states in this country. They've practically invested over $1 billion in the economy, and they have over 14,000 employees. So those are the kind of conversations that we're talking about. They are in the best position because they are using steel. They have a steel company. So in what way can we still advance the steel business in Nigeria in such a manner that it impacts our shipbuilding and ship repair facilities? So we talk about fisheries and aquaculture. Nigeria is still losing billions annually to unregulated fishing and import dependence, while aquaculture potential is constrained by poor cold chain logistics and inadequate coastal protection. I know the minister himself has been doing a lot in this space, but they still need to come out to the public, to Nigerians out there, 200 Nigerians who eat fish, who consume fish, who are doing business in Makoko, who are doing business in Liverpool, who are doing business in Delta. These are the conversations that state governments are having with us. What needs to be done? You know, coastal and maritime tourism again still remain underexploited despite rich natural and cultural assets due to insecurity and infrastructural deficit. Someone was talking to me earlier and talking about the reason why states are having issues. But remember, Kebbi had an Agogo Fishing Festival. I was invited. First, the one they did in Abuja, then before Kebbi. Look at the massive potential of Agogo Fishing Festival. How many years have they had this potential? How can this particular state, through its fishing activities, working with this ecosystem that we're talking about, private and public sector, really solve the problem of fishing and aquaculture in Nigeria? Sokoto, for instance, has onions. If you want 1 million metric tons of onions, how do you move it in Sokoto so that the farmer onions in Sokoto are making money without leaving Sokoto to Lagos? Marine resource, those are the deficits that we need to balance. Marine resources and energy, still an untapped potential. Offshore oil and gas, still dominate our energy. But what about renewable blue energy, tidal wind? When I talked about water, that we can go under the sea and have because a nation said they want their people in space, and they spent money and they galvanize all the needed resources. So if we set our heart on it as a nation, we can actually get there. But then, do you know that you can also generate energy from water? Many people really don't know. So how does Nigeria plan to generate energy from its tidal energy from its water distance? So it still remains untapped. So the sector's contribution to GDP is still very, very below 3%, far below its potential to drive diversification, job creation, and industrialization. So that is what we are saying. How do we move from theory to practice as a nation? How do we measure in practical terms and have a dashboard of where we are monitoring jobs, 100,000, 200,000 to 1 million in what number of years, in what number of months? So what are exactly the summit's objectives? To showcase investment opportunities across Nigeria's economic value chain. As I speak to you through the work that we're doing with the federal government, all the agencies have submitted their area of investment needs. Nigerian Ports Authority, NIMASA, Shippers Council, NIWA, particularly everybody. So we're working together. So we're facilitating dialogue on policy and regulatory reforms that is still needed for sustainable maritime development. Most of the policies that are still hanging at the Senate committees, if you don't, investment follows policy. When you show your policy direction, investors will come to you naturally. So we need to also investigate our legislators, which at once are the hanging policy. What next needs to be done? Who needs to do what? We need to develop an actionable framework to improve port efficiency, trade logistics, connectivity, and coastal infrastructure. And like I said, strengthen partnerships between governments and the private sector and international investors. It was an international investor that brought me back to the table when I received a call on facilitating $1 billion that wanted to come into the economy. Readily available funding, ready to fund bankable projects. So for instance, if you have a cargo to move from Dangote refinery, also you do not have the vessel, there is funding that gives you access to the vessel that you need to be able to move that business and earn your money and pay back and all that. And these things are the conversations that we've been having, a decade conversation. So it's not something that happens now and we disappear from the radar. That's why we took our time solidifying our partnership and collaboration with the government. So we identified capacity building priorities, financing mechanisms for sectoral growth. That and many more are the things packaged in the Blue Economic Investment Summit. So when you attend, you get to interact more with all the stakeholders across the entire value chain, private and public sector. So I visit the website showing on the screen, call the numbers on the website, ask questions, send an email, and our team are readily available to attend to you. Whatever it is we cannot handle, be sure and certain that the government is on the table, whether on issues concerning your state. The governors are there. One of them is leading 6 commissioners. They have many states now have begun to domesticate blue economy, so they can attend to the issues at their own domain. And then, what more else can you ask for? Visit the website, call the numbers, and we'll be looking forward to receiving you at the event.